An advisor should answer these 14 questions. I'll share them next, but in this episode, I'm going to address the question, IUL, who can I trust to help me establish one correctly? I'm asked this question all the time. Get ready. I'm going to show you how you can find somebody you can trust. So my name's Doug Andrew, and I've helped people now for more than 48 years optimize their financial assets, minimize unnecessary taxes, and empower their authentic wealth to be able to prepare for long-term goals such as retirement from a financial standpoint. But also I help people understand how to rethink their thinking in regards to their assets, how they're going to pass them down to their children and grandchildren using what I call equal opportunity trust instead of equal distribution, and on and on. You know, I've been so blessed in my career to have authored 12 books so far. At the end of this episode, I'm going to show you how you can claim your free copy of this book. It's been flying off of our warehouse shelves. It's called The Laser Fund, and this teaches you how to diversify and create the foundation for a tax-free retirement. Now, the Laser Fund is my name for one of my favorite financial vehicles that I have used now for more than 4.5 decades to help my own clients accumulate their money tax-free and then be able to access that money tax-free all through retirement. And when they ultimately pass away, anything they leave behind actually increases in value, blossoms in value, and transfers income tax-free to their spouse, their kids, their grandkids, a church, a charity, whoever, okay? Nothing else in the Internal Revenue Code does that. And that's why I'm passionate about writing books and providing education like these videos on this YouTube channel, 3-Dimensional Wealth. So if you don't know what the Laser Fund is, it is an indexed universal life insurance contract that is structured correctly and funded properly. So let me say it this way. When people say, what is a laser fund? I'll say, well, it is an indexed universal life, but I would say that over 99% of indexed universal life insurance policies would not be qualified to be classified as a laser fund. So what's the difference? It must be structured correctly and funded properly. Hence, this episode will show you the criteria to determine who you can trust to be able to set one up correctly and fund it properly. Otherwise, it will not perform at its optimum level or its full potential. And I can tell you horror stories of people who did not do this correctly. They used their nephew or a brother-in-law because they had an insurance license. And 7-10 years later, when they hear me on the radio say, well, another 7 years has gone by. Most people averaged over 10%. Their money has doubled. So if you had $500,000 in your indexed universal life just 7.5 years ago, you should now have $1 million, or $1 million doubled to $2 million. And people go, wait a minute, I only have half as much as I started with. And I look at it, and in about 30 seconds, I can tell what's wrong. And I go, who set this up for you? They go, well, it was our brother-in-law and my nephew. They had an insurance license. I went, they had no idea what they were doing. That was an expensive relationship. It has happened hundreds of times, and it makes me sick. So I'm going to show you 14 questions that you can ask. They're contained in this book that I want to gift you at the end. But then I'm going to show you how you can actually find somebody or be pointed to somebody who already has proven themselves by passing a proficiency exam and being trained. I'm actually sort of been called the godfather of IUL in the insurance industry. I'm not here to try to pat myself on the back, but I wrote a book clear back at the turn of the century called Misfortune. And that's what put indexed universal life on the map. It is where I have earned average returns of 7 to 10%, and some years 28%, 31%, 61%. This very year that I'm recording this episode, we've had many people lock in gains on their laser funds of 61.33%. So when some of the other naysayers say, I've never seen one do that, well, they haven't seen one structured correctly, obviously. Now, before I go any further to explain the difference between an IUL, Index Universal Life, which there's a ton of them out there to choose from, and what qualifies as a laser fund, if this is resonating with you and you know somebody that ought to watch this episode, be sure and share it, post a comment, click like. But I would love for you to subscribe to this channel, Three Dimensional Wealth. Why? Because I post an in-depth answer to a financial question almost on a daily basis. I have over 500 educational videos. And I'm very passionate about providing insights into opportunities that maybe you didn't know existed before. And stay with me to the end because I want to gift you a free copy of this 300-page book, The Laser Fund. But in this book, after teaching what a laser fund is, okay, and what it does, and if you're cloudy on this, simply put, a laser fund is where you structure an indexed universal life insurance contract for living benefits. And this was the brainchild of E.F. Hutton back in 1980. And it's where you're trying to take the least amount of insurance the IRS will let you get away with under the Internal Revenue Code. And you're putting in the most money or premium that the IRS allows as fast as they allow. And it turns into a tax-free cash cow. It allows you to accumulate your money tax-free under Section 72E of the Internal Revenue Code, which has been around for over 107 years. It allows you to access your money under Section 7702 of the Internal Revenue Code by doing it the smart way so that every $1 million can generate 70, 80, 100,000 a year of tax-free income for as long as you live without depleting your principal. And then when you ultimately pass away, anything left behind blossoms and transfers income tax-free. That's Section 101A. Nothing else in the Internal Revenue Code does that. It was designed by E.F. Hutton to be used for living benefits, for retirement income, working capital for business, for college funding for your kids and grandkids. The death benefit sort of came along for the ride as a secondary objective. See, if people buy life insurance for death benefit, that's just for a death benefit. But E.F. Hutton said, what are we thinking? We want to be able to accumulate, access, and transfer our money tax-free. Let's take the least amount of insurance, put in the most money the IRS allows, as fast as they allow, and it turns into this tax-free cash cow. Now, you can read this book to learn how it does that, but the question that people usually then ask, well, how can I find somebody who I can trust to set one up correctly, to fund it properly, because they will usually read in this book horror stories. In fact, on this side of the book, there are 12 chapters that have about 5 or 6 stories. All but one story talks about how it works and how it was successful, but I always include one story when it went wrong. And it's very obvious why it went wrong. It was not structured correctly in the first place, and it was not funded properly because they did not use an advisor that was proficient. So that's why in what I call the left brain side of the book, the white covered side, this is actually in the 12th chapter. There is what is called a laser ready test. And there's 14 criteria or questions that I put here in bullet points. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these here, but the purpose of putting it in here is so that you can ask whoever it is that you are being told, hey, I can set one of those up for you. You ask them these 14 questions, such as, what is Tefra, Defra, and Tamra? Now, if they can't answer that question off the cuff, that's a red flag. What is a guideline single premium? If you ask them, how do you access your money tax-free? What would be the minimum amount of insurance for, let's say, a 60-year-old who wants to reposition $500,000? Off the top of their head, they should say, about $1,250,000. If they're humming and hawing and they're saying, I don't know, I'll check that out and get back to you, that's a red flag. If you are immersed in this, like the people that I mentor and train, you will know the answers to all 14 questions right off the cuff. If they do not know the answers, that is a danger sign. So how can you find somebody who can answer these questions off the cuff? Because they do it day in and day out. It's not some little side thing that they're going to try to set up for you, because that's where most people end up in disastrous situations where they invested $500,000 and it should have doubled to $1 million in 7.5 years. And instead their $500,000 is only worth $250,000. So many times I've heard those kinds of stories. So here is how you can find somebody that you can trust and ask them these questions. But I can point you to those who have actually passed a 130 question proficiency exam. And I'll tell you why I designed this exam. So I did this for about 35 years with my own clients, and then my coaches encouraged me to sell my recipe, so to speak, instead of just being preoccupied selling the cake, that I would help far more people if I trained advisors. Long story short, from 2003 to 2007, I had over 3,000 financial advisors, insurance agents, CPAs, tax attorneys come through an intensive 3-day training. They paid $6,000 in tuition. And after a few years, I thought, I wonder how many of them are really remembering or doing this correctly, because if you don't use it, you lose it. So I developed a proficiency exam. It's 100 question, multiple choice, true and false, and 30 essay. Out of 3,000 advisors, only a little over 200 could pass this exam with 70% or higher, because the others were not using it. They had forgotten how to do it. So now I only point my mentees, my students, to the advisors who have passed this proficiency exam and can answer the 14 questions off the cuff in this book. But I started an organization called IUL, Indexed Universal Life, IUL Insiders. This is for professionals, and they must pay tuition to belong, and I teach them every single week for at least an hour, and then my sons teach them for another hour on proper case design. They get immersed into understanding how to do this correctly and funding it properly. They're in the top 0.1% of agents who are licensed to sell Indexed Universal Life. It's called IUL Insiders. So if you're an advisor and you want to be able to have that type of good housekeeping certification, so to speak, you might want to check out IULinsiderspro.com. If you are a consumer and you are wanting to be pointed to somebody who knows how to do it correctly and fund it properly, claim your copy of this book and enter into our database so you'll be notified when we teach these educational sessions, and then I can point you to those professionals who are specialists in this. So go to laserfund.com, L-A-S-E-R fund.com, click on the link below, and claim your free copy of this book. You contribute a nominal amount towards the shipping and handling. I cover the rest of that cost. I fire out a copy of this book for you, and you can begin to read and learn. If you like to listen and learn and watch and learn, there's other options there. This is your beginning to be able to take ownership of your brighter future. So if you're an advisor and you want to learn and get educated, again, you can go to IULinsiderpro.com. Just click on the link below, and you can subscribe and enroll for the next webinar to introduce you to what IUL Insiders is all about.